nice of you to come out in this new anxiety about the new strain of COVID. In some ways, I feel this conversation will be a continuation of conversations Toni and I have, mostly on the phone. She lives much of the time in LA. And in some ways, I feel, I'm trying to think, not possessive of this book, but like a stepmother. I mean, a person who bought the book and did all the incredible editing was Deb Garrison, she's still alive and here. And, but the book just struck me from the start because I saw some early pages as an incredibly different take on both the worlds of ballet, pieces of memoir, biography of Balanchine, which I think was going to be my first question, but so I guess the first question I'd like to ask you, Toni, is the book is such an interesting and complex mixture of as genres. How did you come upon it, and what was your original idea for it, and how did it evolve?
Thank you. Is this working?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all for coming. This is the most people in a room since pre-COVID for me. Great for a worthy time. I want to thank Rizzoli's and their beautiful store for hosting this. And I want to thank Daphne, who I adore, who's an amazing writer, and I'm very honored that she is doing this with me. And I also want to thank my amazing, amazing editor, Deborah Garrison, who is over here. This book couldn't have happened without her. And Daphne said she feels like a stepmother. I've always said she's the godmother of this book. So I'm very happy to be here. Okay, so, what was the question?
How did the book begin?
Yes, okay, well, this book has been in the works, so to speak, for about 15 years. I first had a contract for it in 2007, and the idea then was for it to be kind of an academic, somebody suggested I write about Balanchine, like a biography, and I knew that wasn't the scope of that and the depth of that. It wasn't my particular talent, interested as I was. And I kind of got this idea, I'll write like a biography of Serenade, and of course Serenade was the one that came to mind. And it seemed like a good idea then, and it still seems like a good idea, which often doesn't happen with ideas. So it was going to be, I guess, a more academic kind of a book of the history of Serenade, which has so much history, and so many questions around it, and so many layers, and so much depth, and so much mystery. But I started to write that book, I did some interviews, and I just came to a standstill, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. You know, it was a long and painful thing, and I did many other things in the meantime. I didn't work on it for 15 years at all. I put it aside for years and years at a time, and I couldn't go back to it. I actually was looking today, I wrote a diary about why can't I write this book. And including defending this book's not needed, everybody knows about Balanchine, they don't need me, etc. Anyway, so then I decided finally I've got to, as they say, you know, I've got to, you know, do this or get off the pot. So somehow something turned, and one might say at this point in time, it's by definition now, I wasn't able to write this book until I did. And I think it's because it is definitely the most intimate book I've ever written. And it was basically, it's about my love for Balanchine, which all of us in New York City Ballet have. This is not unique to me. In the people who knew him and the audience, probably many of you here, and his work. So the way I finally was able to finish it was to do the book I wanted to write. So it took, in a sense, I don't want to say a lot of courage, but I felt unworthy. I mean, you know, this is like Shakespeare's King Lear. You know, how am I gonna write about this and do it justice? So there was an enormous amount of the, kind of writer's feeling of inadequacy. And then somehow, I pushed through, and what I ended up doing and what's in this book, and I am so grateful that Pantheon and Deb embraced the way I did it, which is I literally just put in, and that's why it comes out in this kind of mix of memoir, and there's history, and there's all of ballet history, sort of very, with only choosing, every single thing in it is something that I love. So there's, all of that. So much of ballet history, for example, is not in it. So much of the movement in Serenade isn't in it. I just went with my gut, so it was kind of interesting, and it was quite scary. So then it turned into this mix, and of course, I'm a very personal writer. I've done other memoirs, so the memoir part was sort of came naturally, and so it became, this curious mix, and of course I didn't know if that would work. It's like, well, this isn't a historic book, this isn't a, academic book, this isn't a memoir, it's sort of its own sort of mix.
But I was gonna ask you one thing, Toni, about what you just said, unless you don't want to refer to it, but I thought for readers and writers, it's an interesting little fact that it also helped, I thought, release you when you left an academic press.
Yes, this book was originally at
Right.
Yale University Press.
Who would not have allowed, I don't think, for this kind of mixture and, okay, this is a slightly long question. Practically every little girl in our society dreams of growing up and becoming a ballet dancer, and many have taken ballet classes. Aside, self-evidently from talent, there is the overriding issue of self-discipline that separates the aspirants from the ones who make it. When and why did you fully enter the practice of ballet? When did the switch flip? Had you dreamed, these are 900 questions, had you dreamed of becoming a ballerina? And did you know very quickly that you had the will and commitment?
In somewhat reverse order, no, I never dreamed of being a ballerina. And to this day, I'm not sure if I had the will or commitment. I did what I did, so there's some evidence there. I did not have the kind of classic dream of, little girl wanting to be in the tutu. I took ballet classes very young, like so many, I'm sure so many of you here did at some point, starting when I was 4. But I liked the outfit. I wasn't really, a cute outfit. Like I did it in England, and there was a nice grosgrain belt and a little white tunic and red soft ballet shoes. But I wasn't bitten by the, I want to dance. And also I really didn't know that big people dance. I thought it was a little girl occupation. And I sort of did that once a week for a while. And I started doing it because my mother wanted to give me an appetite, the way you send your child to exercise class. And then, I did it on and off, and then it got very serious when I went to school of American Ballet in New York. And at the time, my mother and I, it sounds strange, but we didn't know who Balanchine was. I kind of came from European parents, and I was sort of all about the Royal Ballet, because I had seen Margot Fonteyn, and, I lived so when I first took a ballet class, I lived in Bristol, England, then North Carolina, and then when I came to New York, I went to SAB. And then, of course, very quickly, you walk through the doors of Balanchine's kingdom, and immediately, it's just in the air. And the first time I would have seen him was when I was 11, and was a child selected for Nutcracker, so many children are. But this interesting thing that you brought up about the drive, I can only say what's true for me. I didn't have this dream. It's quite an unromantic thing, which I write about, that I can only assess in hindsight, that the drive to go from just doing this once a week and this nice outfit was when they took me in the School of American Ballet, and at the time, I was little and thin and had all the appropriate things they wanted. But about 6 months later, Diana Adams, the great Balanchine ballerina who was running the school, called my mother and said, "We're not sure about her feet." And this was life-changing to me.
She said we are worried about her feet.
Yes.
the book.
Yes, we are worried, okay, we are worried about her feet. Well, I'm worried about my feet. But yes, my feet ended up being fine to, I succeeded in being a professional dancer, but I didn't have like those crazy arches like some people do. And I was a little behind in the class, but the thing is that this upset me, the fact that I was told maybe I wouldn't be able to dance is what propelled me to want to dance. It's not very romantic, but it's a fact. And I probably operate a lot in my life on defiance. This goes back to probably childhood psychology and the desperation to not fail. I mean, it was unbearable, the thought of failing once I was told it was possible. And then I went from the age of 11, between 11 and 16, I went from the bottom of my ballet class to one of the 2 or 3 at the top who was chosen by Balanchine. So that's just how it happened to me,
I was thinking when you talked about defiance. I'm sorry. I was thinking when you alluded to your defiance, which I think is one of your best qualities, it reminds me, in that way, similarity. I always think I survived because of defiance, that it got me through some difficulties. I was going to bring up the all-important statement of Miss Adams, but you did already. I had a few things. Were you surprised when you got into Balanchine School? You seem to have applied almost on a lark.
Yes. No, as I said, we didn't know it was the school. It came about because we lived in a great big apartment building on East 77th Street, the Pavilion. I mean, it's been there forever, huge place. And my mother was looking for ballet school for me, and literally another mother in the building, while doing the laundry in the laundry room downstairs, said her girl went to school learning ballet. So my mother probably thought it was like the local ballet joint. And so we went there. That is how it happened. I mean, most mothers who take their kids to SAB when they're 8 years old, they know what they're doing. So I learned after the fact. So, I mean, yes, it was nice to succeed and be taken in, but I didn't realize, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to dance for Balanchine now. It was just like, on that particular day, I didn't fail.
In some ways, you alluded to the question I was going to ask, which is, people always talk about ballet moms. There's even a popular TV show with that name that I have watched in horror. You sort of alluded already, your mother didn't know what Balanchine was. And so your mother, what was she like? She wasn't a stage mother anyway.
No.
Was she a supportive presence to a degree, or?
In my life or in ballet?
Ballet.
Not really. She wasn't against it. My mother, I mean, is, the way I sort of see it now is she's European. She escaped Hitler when she was 5 years old. And when we came to America, my father's Australian, so I had a very strict European upbringing that was a little bit like, Americans are, spoiled children, self-indulgent, etc. And and very much not overselling their children. I also have a very brilliant brother who's a molecular biologist, but the parents were very low-key. So there was no sense, for example, in getting into the School of American Ballet, where some mothers would probably these days be Instagramming it, right? But no, there was nothing. And when I ran into problems, my parents' favorite, I'd come home and say, oh my God, Jenny's leg is like, going up higher than mine, boo hoo hoo. And which was a daily occurrence that everyone around you was better than you, which is a great way to arrive at excellence, of course. They would say, well, that's okay, honey, you can go to college, which is, I think, what they wanted me to do. My feeling about that is become somewhat more like accepting and loving, because they didn't know better, and without knowing much, they didn't think, well, I think they knew it was very rare to make it in the dance world, and it was so foreign. My father was a scientist, they were sort of academics, so no, when I was crying, my mother, I think I would have liked a mother who said, no, but your leg's prettier than Jenny's, or whatever, right? But no, I didn't get any of that.
I have one suggestion. We still have interesting questions to cover, but that maybe Toni would read just a little bit of the book so you get some sense of it.
Sure. I think I'll read maybe just the very opening of the book, begin at the beginning. Let's see here. Okay, this section is called Curtain Up. The violins begin. It is 8:07 p.m. I know this because that is when the 8 o'clock performance starts. Serenade is always first, always the opener of 3 ballets. The hors d'oeuvre, Mr. B would say, of the meal he served to his audience night after night in his restaurant, his theater of beauty. 5 minutes earlier, our handsome stage manager, Perry Sylvie, had called, "Places, please." This is the cue to take a last sip of water from the hallway water fountain beside the elevator, just beyond the backstage area. I wet my fingers and smooth down any remaining stray wisps of hair. Not a single one is out of place. It can't be. I rub a finger across my teeth to remove any pink lipstick that has migrated over, and then smooth some Vaseline on my teeth. This way, if my mouth gets dry on stage, my lips won't stick to my teeth. That's a bad moment. Liplessness. I have just finished sewing with big, broad stitches in thick beige crochet thread, a large darning needle, the half-inch tips of my tightly knotted toe shoe ribbons inside the ankle ribbons. Not everyone does this. Some just tuck them inside. I used to tuck too, but although I never had one come loose, the thought alone eventually became so worrying that I started sewing them in. It's not that your shoe would come off. That simply does not happen to a professional dancer. It's unthinkable. But that little half-inch extra ribbon would protrude from your ankle and wreck the smooth line of your inner leg and foot. And ballet is all about lines, if it's about anything. Tying our ribbons is a practical necessity, while sewing their tips is an aesthetic one. Thus, they are of equal concern. The ends are sewn in, security. We all flock around the rosin box like hummingbirds at a feeder. Rosin on the heels of the tights to anchor inside of the shoe, then rosin all over the flat toe tips, the sides, the shank. Next girl, now the water bucket. A quick dip, about 2 inches, with a flexed foot, shoe and all, soaking the heel, not only shrinks the satin around the ankle for extra traction, but also forms a sticky paste with the rosin inside the heel of the shoe and wrecks your tights. Despite nightly washing, they become permanently hardened, darkened at the heels, crunchy with embedded rosin. The shoes, the hair, a high, tight bun, no glitter, no tiara, no pastel flower bouquets. We don't even wear the usual small stud rhinestone earrings that we do for most other ballets, which shed occasional sparkles as we move. Serenade is matte. Never in any ballet do we wear personal jewelry that would distract, indicating one's off-stage life. On stage, we are other. Then the costume, the tight blue bodice secured by invisible nude elastic straps, is shaped by the vertical princess seams, 360 degrees around, to cling to our slim torsos. The matching blue tulle to the ankles has 2 translucent panels running the full length of each leg in front. Ready.
When this interests me about you beyond the book, when and how did the literary side of you develop? The side that would read a lot and go on to write a well-received memoir, Winter Season, which you described as a diary, at such a young age, I think between 21 and 22. most of all, how did you find the time between the 12-hour days you spent 6 days a week rehearsing?
I don't know, but I'll see what I can dig up for you, because I'm surprised by it now too. How I developed my interest in words and books and literature and writing was nothing to do with going to school. I had a pretty, bad education at professional children's school. That was not really the main focus for any dancer who went there, but it's a school to this day that allows you to get a little math and French and stuff squeezed in between your ballet classes. But I had this amazing girlfriend who also went to SAB. She didn't go on to be in the company, and she was my education. So between the ages of about 14 to about 22, we just completely on our own. I feel like she was the leader. She, I feel like, introduced me to books, and it was incredible, and I probably profited from it not being anything to do with school. I remember the only thing I learned in school that was related to literature is I had a very good English teacher one year in 9th grade, and we read Hamlet, and that had a lot of meaning to me. But I read any book that my friend Sandy suggested, and we worked our way through everything. D.H. Lawrence and Freud and Pascal and Descartes and on, and Henry Miller. And we were such a little, reading club of our own that she would write me letters calling me Henry, and she was June Miller. It's interesting, I was the boy. And I would underline like a man, woman, asterisks. When I read Kierkegaard, I took a lot of notes. I have 3 notebooks now of writing notes, nothing to do with school. So I was became possessed. It spoke to me. I would read walking along the street, like people I guess do with their phones now, but I would have a book and a pen and walk along the street. And I used to go to the movie theater, and when you could still smoke, really dating myself, that would show, like a double bill of Barbara Stanwyck. I would take a book with a pen, with a light in it, and I would write in my diary while I'm watching the movie, smoking cigarettes. I don't know what I was doing. And that led to me writing. I never thought to be a writer, because by then my adoration and respect for what became, real writers, Hemingway, Montaigne, great classic writers, Tolstoy. This was not going to be me. It didn't occur to me. Plus I was a dancer, plus I'd never been to college. But I started keeping a diary, as so many people do, and that turned into Intricacies on my first book, which really was my diary. And that happened because after, we were in the theater from 10:30 with our ballet class in the morning, rehearsing all day with these union breaks, 2-hour break between 6 and 8 to get ourselves together, take a shower, brush our teeth, shuffle a muffin, and then performance from 8 to 10:30 or 11. And then after that, I would go for my big, since such a ballet dancer, I would go for my big meal of the day by myself at 11 o'clock at the greasy Greek coffee joint near where I lived on the Upper West Side, because you could afford to as a dancer then. And I would have, every single night, I would have scrambled eggs and a bran muffin. And on my legal pad, because I didn't type anything, on my legal pad, I wrote this diary that became my voluminous diary from which winter season came.
It's interesting. In some ways, you're a model for autodidacts. Being an autodidact. In fact, reading your book, I thought, that would have had a better education. Just stroll out.
I'm not nearly as educated as you, Daphne, so.
But you got to stroll through the paths that interested you.
Yes,
I
followed my nose, so to speak, completely.
I had 2 technical questions that some of you may know that just fascinated me. Would you describe the process, because it's always something when I watch ballet, I think, how do they do this? Would you describe the process of going on point support ballet itself. So maybe just describe as much as you want.
Yes, well, of course, all these things go together. I guess, like, point and point shoes and standing on our toes and turnout, one would say, are the two kind of, very basic things that distinguish ballet from anything, but also distinguish it from all other forms of dance, of which there are so many, jazz, modern, hip hop, the tap, everything. So dancers go on point. This was the first, the great Marie Taglioni was the first to take us up there. I think she had ballet slippers that were very not like ours. And it, being on point, so first one on point when I was about 10, 11, I think that's about the stage. It's very carefully curated. If you go on too young, as they do in a lot of ballet schools that aren't really properly, doing the right thing, if you go too young, the bones in the feet are too soft, and you can mess things up. And of course, if you start anything in ballet too late, it's too late. And too late is, there's exceptions, but in general, if you're not fully in it by 10, 11, it's going to be too late to be professional for sure. And the turnout, so I first got my first pair of point shoes when I was 11, and it improved my feet. Yeah, they're really incredible things. They're handmade, I believe to this day. They're incredibly expensive, and we had a Toshi room at the State Theater. I'm sure they still have it. I will always call it the New York State Theater. And there was a Toshi room. It was just a fantastic thing. We all wore frieze, that kind of peachy color, not so pink. And they were all in cubbies with our names on it, because we get our own shoes made exactly. We'd have, the shank, the band, everything made to order from usually probably a little old man or a young man at the factory in England that we never met. And he had a crisscross or an A, he'd have a sign on the bottom. And in those cubbies, we'd have like hundreds of shoes with our names written on the bottom. And every between matinee and evenings on the weekends, Saturday and or Sunday, they'd open the Toshi room, and depending on our schedule that week, we could go in and take as many as 12 pairs. And of course, they paid for them. My God, it's so fantastic. And there's nothing like point shoes. That's why I still like high heels, because I feel like myself when I'm high up. But now, I have a heel holding me up. But now turnout is also has to be started very young, where the body is stuck, because we're naturally basically built parallel, scientifically, anatomically. So that also has to be started around age 8 or 9, and even then some people's hips just won't do it. But the key to it that I think is perhaps often missed, that people think it's the feet, and of course it is, but no, a real turnout is the hips turning out, and with that, it goes, if you have the hip, the knee, and the foot, the whole thing goes together. You just flip the feet out, that's ballet in a non-professional place. And you can hurt yourself. So for the hips to rotate, the hip socket is a ball and, like this. For the whole thing to turn there is not natural. So we run into all kinds of issues with that. Some people have very naturally loose hips, like gymnasts or Cirque du Soleil people, some less so, etc. But being turned out, how can I say this, sort of somewhat briefly, the fact that ballet is turned out, and of course turned out simultaneously, both legs are always turned out, whether you have one on the ground, one in the air or something. Everything is rotated so the inner thigh comes forward. And this is really, not only is it very beautiful in terms of the line of the leg, but to me it has a very kind of metaphysical thing. It's like the body at its most open and most, and it's kind of the most long, and you can do things that turn out that are just completely unimaginable otherwise.
And one of the things you noted about, Serenade, I should have the name right, Serenade, is the surprising is that it begins with Parallel, which seems, I just watched it last night and I thought it's amazing the way suddenly everyone, I don't know, the rivalry in the corps and in general seemed incredibly strong, and I imagine there wasn't much of friendship, or, you know, you and I have talked about her being somewhat, I think would come as a surprise to people, of a lone, you know, of a loner. But how did the passion for Balanchine, how was it engendered in you and all the other girls? It was, you've talked, and you talk in the book wonderfully about him. I mean, in a simple, reductive term, he was charismatic, but that is the half of it, the quarter of it.
Less than that.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, Balanchine, who we call Mr. B. Well, once, as I said, once you graduate school, and then if you're fortunate enough to be chosen by him, this is in my day, obviously, to join the company, you are in truly an entire world, and it's really osmosis, you know. I mean, I read much later a biography of him, but he becomes, it's just a known thing, it's not even discussed, that he is, and I say this in the best way, but he is the all-powerful kind of, the god, the king, the benevolent dictator. He is the one to us. And this happens, of course, very young, and then you know him over the years, and of course I knew him at the end of his life, so I only can speak to my own experience, and I was just so incredibly fortunate to be in the right time and place where I was there and knew him, you know, to the extent that I did, you know, but I wasn't close to him, that I don't know, I mean, he was obviously something of a father figure, but it is so much more than that, you know, and I think there is a bit of a history of a lot of dancer girls having either bad or absent fathers, so I think that's quite prevalent. Anyway, and he was certainly, you know, that, but he became the one we wanted to please, but also we were in a world between the school, the toe shoes, the gorgeous costumes. He made us so beautiful, more beautiful than we ever were without him. He shaped, you know, I mean, he shaped our bodies with the training. He shaped our minds, never by telling us anything, but it was kind of, you know, I was thinking of him as a Sufi, and that the way he taught was ballet. That was the language for his wisdom. And it was through the steps that we learned this kind of morality about how to live and how to, you know, Lincoln Kirstein famously said, ballet is about how to behave. And so we learned this kind of courtesy and incredibly high standard and striving for beauty, 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 more beauty. What a privilege. You know.
Were you, tell me, you read the book, had to stop dancing, I think it was at age 26, because of a hip injury. And I wondered, were you heartbroken when you had to stop, or was part of you relieved?
That's a good question, Daphne. The timing was very strange. My hip went bad really quite suddenly. I mean, within the space of 2 weeks, my body had completely, something happened. And to this day, no doctor really knows exactly what happened. But it was 6 months after Balanchine died, so in hindsight, this all kind of takes on curious meaning. It also happened to be the same month, August 1983, that Suzanne Farrell's hip went bad after he died. Now, we have completely different bodies, and there's no correlation between Suzanne and me, but that just is what happened. I tried to, they told me my career was over. I sort of had to go to bed, I had to relearn how to dance again, like little baby steps, little tiny first position. I got back on stage, but then eventually I kept getting other injuries. I'd lost all the cartilage in my right hip. My left one is still perfect, and my right one is now titanium. But I had already written, published Winter Season, so I can only say all of this in hindsight, that I feel like, I think Daphne maybe called it kismet, in hindsight. It's very rare, even for 20, I think my dad was 25, that for a career to be taken away definitively. Almost every injury a dancer gets, they can get over, either by time or surgery or working on it. But if you lose your cartilage, it's gone. And you've got bone on bone, and it's just a disaster. Maybe somebody had that design, and I happened to be so fortunate that I'd already published a book, though I still wanted to dance, and I hadn't just like, oh, I'm going to go and be a writer now. I still wanted to dance, so I was deprived of that, but I also was extremely fortunate that it's incredible that I did have something else I could do. Because, most dancers, quite rightly, usually it's almost a ratio. The better the dancer you are, the less you are prepared for anything else. Because, if you're, I know a lot of them go to college now, I don't know how they do it, and, we had one girl go to college, she kept it secret, and we looked down upon it, because she was not focusing on her dancing, and she wasn't the best dancer in the company. Whatever. We thought it was very strange. She was always studying books in the dressing room.
I just want to check one thing. Do we have time for 2 or 3 more questions, or 2?
It's 6:50. You probably do. Yeah, 1 or 2.
Yeah. I wanted to know, does writing, does it give you a different kind of thrill, or the way dancing gave you a thrill, or is it not a similar experience?
No, it's not similar. In that it's a profession one might strive at and work at, that's certainly similar, but no, being on stage in a moment, in a ballet, in Serenade, the orchestra's playing, the curtain's going up, your body is moving. This is an in-the-moment experience. And writing, when I don't hate writing, well, I never hate it, but when I'm not struggling so much that I'm blinded by misery and tears, when writing is good, it has its own thrill, as you say, but it's entirely different, and you're alone. There's a few things that are really nice about it, which is that unlike a live performance where if you you've rehearsed and done your best, but you could mess up live in front of 2,800 people, and not to mention Balanchine when I was there, to mess up in front of him. You wanted to die, though he didn't mind. But with writing, I think I really thrive, and maybe that's why I started a diary, over being able to be entirely myself, whoever that is. I think it's a way to find out who I am by writing, that I feel an incredible freedom on good days writing. Because I feel like I got this from Henry Miller, which is probably a dated thing to say, which is, oh my God, you can fucking say anything on the page with nobody seeing it. This isn't like in a published book, but like just the pure freedom of writing something on a page, no one ever has to see it. And that is my definition of freedom. And I didn't really feel free as a dancer. You were just never good enough, just never felt good enough.
It's interesting. The one thing I would say is just for me about writing, and then I have one more question, and the questions and answers. is you don't fall, you know, apart or make a mistake in public. But I think for many writers, and also for you, there are inner censors to always deal with and fight back.
Oh yes, that's the misery part.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think this is very much not original to me, but when you write, all your demons are with you, you know. I mean, your self-censors, yes, which are usually worse than any critic, other critic, outside critic, are there. So yes, there is certainly parallel to dancing, the sense of having to overcome oneself. But isn't that really, I mean, to me, that's what life is. I have to overcome my, you know, my natural laziness, my natural, all of us are one's natural selfishness, one's natural, some of the things aren't good. And this, just is a bit of a tangent, but you know, ballet is nothing if not discipline. And so I learned that there, and of course you need that to write, as you know, Daphne. I think you need discipline to live any life. I don't mean a moral life. I see discipline in everything I do, from the dishes to the bed, to dealing with the cat, to writing a book. It is all, to me, in a sense, about discipline, you know, and.
My final question, are you working on or thinking about another book? And which always annoys me when writers are asked this within 2 seconds of a book being published. Like, what is your next book? And do you, or not even a book, do you have thoughts for essays or whatever, or and what subject they might be, or is this?
Well, yes, you know, there is, it's very, you know, it's undefined at the moment, so I won't say very much, but yes, there is something I've been working on. You know, that's 15 years that Serenade took. Well, I was working on this other thing all that time too. So, and yes, I have, you know, 90,000 words, but that 90,000 words does not make a book. And I feel like there's a thing that I want to look at more and put together and see if it's something, for sure. And the one other thing that interests me, possibly for an essay, I haven't done anything like that for a long time, is that for the entire isolation of COVID, while I was finishing and working on this book, I read literally all of Edith Wharton, who I'd never read, and I'm madly, madly in love with her. And I did that to teach myself to read again, and I thought of maybe writing something about, not really her, she's, you know, but how I learned how to read again by putting the phone in the other room, by discipline. And when I got back, you know, I talked about that great love I had when I was young for reading. It was like food, I'm on the street with a book. I got that back reading Edith Wharton, and I was afraid I lost it forever. So.
You certainly didn't, because you were always excited.
I'm obsessed with her.
Having just read. So I guess this is Q&A?
Yeah, put your hands up if you'd like to ask the question. I can bring the mic over.
Sure.
So 9,000 words, that's not chopped liver, as they say. I want to give you a wonderful tip on the rave review that you got for the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. If you haven't read it, read it and it'll give you quite a lift. Do you by any chance still dance and or teach others to dance or talk to students about dancing and being dancers? Thank you.
Thank you for what you said. No, I don't teach, and I never have, and it never really interested me. But many of my peers of New York City Ballet from my time there do that, have schools, run companies, teach, and they're all excellent at it. It never I write, that wasn't something of interest to me. And no, aside from a bit of fun dancing, to, music, more modern music that I like, I don't do ballet classes anymore. I do other things though. I like to, move.
This morning I picked up my very old copy of Winter Season and thinking about this talk with all my scribbled notes in it from when I was younger. And I was reading the letter Lincoln sent to you about the fact that he thought you may be a part of New York City Ballet's future in some way again. And I was wondering if you felt like this book did that, or how Serenade and Winter Season relate in some way, if they do or not.
Yes, I think they're completely related. They're both by me. They're memoirs of Balanchine and New York City Ballet, with exactly 40 years. I can't believe that, 40 years between them. Yeah, they're a pair, I think. Yes, that was an amazing letter Lincoln Christie wrote to me after Winter Season was published. Thank you for mentioning that. It makes me feel quite emotional. And yes, he said something about you, made me very emotional.
I cried when I read it too.
He said something about, you will be part of our future. Now, he wrote this when Balanchine was just dying. You will be part of our future. I'm not sure how or why, and he commented, he said something to the effect of, but you have been given, he didn't use that terrible word, gifted, that we say now. He said, you have been given something to the effect of two things, not one, how to dance and how to write. And I would like to think that in this book, I would just like to think that he and Balanchine would be pleased.
Sure they'd be
They are.
pleased. What's the
They were the kings of my life.
What's that great quote from Lincoln Kirstein that I think I saw first in your house in LA about nostalgia?
Yes, it was in that same letter that you
Right.
referred to, where he said, because Balanchine was dying, he said, the future will be different. But he said, nostalgia is pure vanity. Quite interesting, yes. He said, now is the religion I believe in. And he talked about the theater unknown to the audience. I'm not butchering his incredible prose, but is now basically the replacement, probably theater of all sorts, is the replacement for churches. And this is why, I'm just giving it to you now, many of you might know this, why Suzanne Farrell in Mozartiana in the Gregaria, where she actually prays on stage, only Balanchine could make that work. He said that is why the audiences are so moved by her, though they may not know it, because it is a sacred function.
Hi Toni, congratulations on your book. This is so exciting. I wanted to know, because we're talking about Serenade, of course, but as someone who's been watching New York City Ballet myself for over 20 years, I feel very possessive over individual ballets. I have my favorites, I have the ones I try to love, I have the ones I feel like I'll never love. So in addition to Serenade, do you have any other ballets where you watch it and you go, oh God, here it is, you go, oh God, why are we still doing this? Just sort of your first-hand experience, and if you have danced them or you haven't, but just, any other in your repertoire of favorites?
Well, these answers won't surprise those of you who know Balanchine's work. Concerto Barocco, this is truly sacred. Violin Concerto, Stravinsky Violin Concerto, Robert Schumann's David's Bungotanza. I did not dance in all of these. I danced in Barocco, not in Schumann. I think I learned as an understudy but never performed in violin. Symphony in 3 movements. Bizet, Symphony in C, by Bizet. He was 17 when he wrote the music. Anyway, yes, I mean, it's a fun discussion in Balanchine's enormously prolific life to everybody's favorite top 5 Balanchine, top 10 Balanchine. But anyway, those are some that come to mind, and I did dance in Concerto Barocco many, many times, and that was incredible. But one thing incredible about Concerto Barocco, I think it's about 20 minutes, 22 minutes, double violin concerto, is that the core, there's just 8 of us. The curtain goes up and we're on stage, as in Serenade, and we never leave the stage. You know, Serenade, we're on and off. Almost every ballet, you're on and off, and get a breather in the wings, dab yourself, get a, fix your shoe or something. Concerto Barocco, you are on for 22 minutes straight, and that is a lot.
I've always wondered, especially Serenade, since that's the topic of this book, I've seen it many, many times over a period of years with many different dancers. And still, to this day, when that curtain opens, I get teary and my heart just swells. And I've often wondered, do dancers feel any of that emotion when they're on stage and getting ready? Because it's just such a thing of beauty. Or are you just too focused on like, oh my God, is my toe shoe right, or am I going to forget a step, or
Yeah.
But do you all also feel that emotion that many people in the audience are feeling?
That's a great question, thank you. Well, a little bit, if you read further what I did, I take you on stage when it happens. No, first and foremost, we are professionals. Curtain goes up and we do what we know to do. The movement, the music, when we do everything, and we've all got everything together. However, I think with any ballet, and certainly Serenade, which to dancers around the world and to in City Ballet has its very own special place and always does to dancers. When the curtain goes up and we are in our pose, back when I was doing it, Balanchine would be in the front wing. So that was something. The audience didn't know it, but he'd come in and lean on the front wing, almost on stage. And in the back of the wings, they're like unfinished wood, probably some splinters and stuff. And he'd lean his elbow on a piece of the wood that came out and just watch like this. And I mean, he was this close to the edge of the wing. That was his spot, night after night. He'd come in right as the curtain was about to go up. So yeah, did we feel something? Oh yes.
Not the same as the audience.
No, he was the more important one. Just, that's the way it was.
Should we wrap up? One more?
I just wanted to mention, it's such a pleasure. I guess I would say everything Toni has written. One of the things I really enjoyed with the Wall Street Journal review and the New York Times one was I felt the intelligence of the people writing the reviews was that they used copious quotes of Toni's writing in the reviews. I haven't seen that often in books, and I thought, God, that is a smart thing to do, because there I was, just immediately transfixed, and again, it's basically, thank you for who you are, what you share with us, heart and soul might almost sound cliche, but you give everything truthfully, and you get to help us expand what our life is. And essentially that's what Balanchine did constantly, right? We all became better people for watching his ballets and understanding is not the right word, but getting to share in that world and hopefully exploring and expanding who we are. So thank you so much.
Well, and I just will quickly say, for those of you who know, this is Paul Kolnick, amazing photographer of Balanchine's last year's, and I'm very proud to say there are, I think, 14 photos of him in this book, by him in this book.
I think we should close there. Thank you so much to Toni and Daphne for that wonderful conversation. Thank you all for coming. Let's give them another.